The Supreme Court has delivered a historic decision, overturning the Trump administration's sweeping tariffs, a move that has sent shockwaves through the world of U.S. trade and international commerce. This ruling is being hailed as one of the most significant legal interventions in recent trade policy history, with far-reaching consequences for how America does business with the rest of the world. By sharply limiting the president's power to unilaterally impose import taxes, the court has set a new precedent, making it clear that such sweeping economic decisions require broader governmental consensus and oversight. This 6-3 ruling reasserts Congress's constitutional authority over trade, ending years of legal battles and reshaping U.S. economic policy. The decision underscores the importance of checks and balances, reminding the nation that no single branch should wield unchecked power over critical economic levers. For American businesses, especially small and medium-sized ones, the decision offers relief from costly tariffs that have strained supply chains and increased prices. Many entrepreneurs and manufacturers have struggled to absorb these extra costs, often passing them on to consumers or cutting jobs to stay afloat. Now, with the rollback of these tariffs, there is renewed hope for stability and growth in the business community. The court's intervention marks a dramatic end to a contentious era of protectionist policy, redrawing the lines of power between the president and Congress. This shift could pave the way for more collaborative and transparent trade negotiations in the future, as lawmakers reclaim their constitutional role in shaping economic policy. This case is not just about tariffs, it's about the fundamental balance of power in American governance. The ruling serves as a powerful reminder of the enduring principles that guide the nation's democracy, ensuring that major policy shifts are subject to debate and accountability. As we explore this ruling, we'll see how a dispute over trade became a defining moment for the limits of executive authority, and why this decision will be studied for years to come as a turning point in the ongoing evolution of American law and politics. The conflict began with President Trump's aggressive America First agenda, using tariffs as leverage in trade negotiations and to protect U.S. industries. By invoking statutes like Section 232 and the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, Trump bypassed Congress, claiming national security justified broad tariffs. This marked a sharp break from past administrations, which favored multilateral agreements and legislative oversight. The administration argued that swift, unilateral action was needed to counteract decades of globalization and protect American jobs. But these moves centralized economic power in the White House, sidelining Congress and established processes. The sweeping tariffs triggered economic pain at home, higher costs for businesses, retaliatory tariffs abroad, and mounting opposition. Ultimately, this bold assertion of executive power set the stage for a constitutional showdown at the Supreme Court. The legal battle centered on a core constitutional question: who controls trade and taxation, Congress or the president? The Commerce Clause and the power to tax are explicitly granted to Congress, yet the Trump administration claimed broad authority under emergency statutes. Opponents argued that Congress never intended to hand over its core powers, especially not through laws meant for true emergencies. The government countered that economic security is national security, and that Congress had delegated flexibility to the executive. The courts faced a complex dilemma. Did the president's actions stay within delegated authority, or did they cross a constitutional line? With lower courts divided, the Supreme Court was left to decide the true limits of executive power in trade. At the heart of this landmark case was the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, a pivotal law that grants the president sweeping authority to regulate economic transactions during times of declared national emergency. Enacted in 1977, IEEPA was designed to give the executive branch the flexibility to respond quickly to threats from abroad, especially those that could undermine the nation's security or economic stability. Its language is intentionally broad, allowing the president to block assets, restrict trade, and take other necessary actions when the country faces extraordinary dangers. The Trump administration invoked IEEPA to justify imposing broad tariffs on foreign goods, arguing that persistent global trade imbalances and unfair practices posed an extraordinary threat to the United States. By declaring a national emergency, the administration claimed it could use IEEPA to reshape trade policy and protect American industries. Plaintiffs, however, pushed back forcefully. They argued that IEEPA was never intended as a tool for general economic protectionism or to address routine trade disputes. Instead, they said, Congress meant for IEEPA to be used for targeted sanctions against specific foreign adversaries or threats, not as a blanket authority to impose tariffs on entire sectors. Their argument was clear. If Congress had wanted to give the president such sweeping power over tariffs and trade, it would have done so explicitly, through direct legislation, not through a law meant for emergencies. The government, on the other hand, leaned heavily on IEEPA's broad and flexible language, insisting that in a declared emergency, the president's authority to regulate any importation was virtually unlimited, and that this was necessary to protect national interests. The Supreme Court now faced a critical question. Did IEEPA truly give the president a blank check to override Congress's traditional authority over trade, or was its scope far narrower, limited to genuine emergencies and specific threats? The answer would have far-reaching consequences, determining whether emergency powers could be used to bypass Congress's core constitutional role in setting trade policy. Ultimately, the case became a referendum on the separation of powers in American economic policy, testing the limits of executive authority and the enduring role of Congress in shaping the nation's economic future. In a landmark case before the Supreme Court, the government presented a forceful argument. They insisted that economic security is fundamentally intertwined with national security, and that in times of crisis, the president must have the flexibility to act swiftly and decisively. The government's lawyers painted a picture of a world where threats to the economy could quickly spiral into threats to the nation's safety, justifying broad executive action. They emphasized that Congress, fully aware of the risks, had intentionally delegated sweeping authority to the executive branch for handling emergencies. According to the government, the courts should respect this delegation and defer to the president's judgment, especially when rapid decisions are needed to protect the country. On the other side, the plaintiffs pushed back hard. They argued that the administration's use of tariffs was a clear abuse of power, stretching the definition of emergency far beyond its intended meaning, to cover what were, in reality, routine trade disputes. This, they said, set a dangerous precedent. The plaintiffs warned that if the president's authority went unchecked, it would erode the Constitution's carefully crafted separation of powers. They argued that such overreach not only threatened the balance of government, but also put American businesses at risk, undermining the very foundation of the nation's economic system. Evidence presented in court showed that the tariffs had real-world consequences. They raised costs for manufacturers and consumers, hurt small businesses across the country, and led to significant job losses in affected industries. The human and economic toll was mounting. The plaintiffs urged the Supreme Court to step in and restore Congress's exclusive constitutional power to tax and regulate commerce, arguing that only the legislative branch should wield such significant authority over the nation's economy. With both sides making passionate arguments, the stage was set for a historic ruling, one that would not only decide the fate of the tariffs, but also define the boundaries of presidential power in times of economic crisis for generations to come. The tariff case wound through lower courts, with judges expressing skepticism about the administration's use of IEEPA. Conflicting rulings created legal uncertainty, leaving businesses and markets in limbo. The Supreme Court stepped in, consolidating related cases and fast-tracking the issue for a definitive answer. The stakes were high, clarity was needed for businesses, and the executive and legislative branches needed clear boundaries. The justices were asked not just to resolve a trade dispute, but to define the limits of executive authority in the modern era. The stage was set for a landmark constitutional decision. Chief Justice Roberts, writing for the 6-3 majority, made it clear: IEEPA does not let the president impose broad tariffs as general economic policy. The court reaffirmed that the power to tax and regulate trade belongs to Congress, not the executive. IEEPA was meant for targeted sanctions, not sweeping tariffs on major trading partners. The majority rejected the idea that vague national security concerns justify bypassing Congress. The ruling set a higher bar for invoking emergency powers in economic matters. The court emphasized that major economic shifts must go through the legislative process. By striking down the tariffs, the court returned the power of the purse to Congress. The decision is a landmark check on executive overreach in economic policy. The Supreme Court's decision sent shockwaves through the economy. Markets surged, and companies reliant on imports saw immediate gains as tariff burdens lifted. Small and medium-sized businesses, hit hardest by tariffs, welcomed the relief. The ruling is expected to lower costs, ease inflation, and boost competitiveness for American manufacturers. International partners responded positively, anticipating a return to stable, rules-based trade. Retaliatory tariffs on U.S. exports are likely to be lifted, benefiting farmers and manufacturers. However, industries that relied on tariff protection now face new challenges and are turning to Congress for support. The focus of trade policy shifts from the White House to Capitol Hill in a new political battle. The Supreme Court's ruling is a landmark for the constitutional balance of power, decisively limiting the president's use of emergency powers in economic policy. The decision promises lower costs, improved trade relations, and a shift away from protectionism. But it also opens new debates as industries seek congressional support in a changed landscape. The court's message is clear: efficiency in the executive branch cannot override constitutional principles. The power to tax and regulate trade is firmly back in Congress's hands. Yet questions remain. Will Congress act swiftly in future crises, or will gridlock hamper decisive action? The challenge now is to balance the need for executive agility with the imperative of legislative oversight in shaping America's economic future.